This week's Torah portion, Noach, I would love to focus on one of the great minds coming out of North Africa, the Chida, Rabbi Chaim, Yosef, David Azulai. Around the time that the Baal Shem Tov hits Mezhibuj, the Chida is a teenager in one of the best yeshivas in the world, in Jerusalem. His rabbis are the best and brightest that Judaism has to offer from Yemen, from the Balkans, from Ashkenaz, and from Morocco. He has the Rashash, he has the Chaim, everyone and anyone. He grows up, he's an Ashkenazi, his mum is of Ashkenazi descent, his father, a famous prominent family from Fez, from Morocco. And he, growing up, becomes, he beyond being a prolific writer, one of the Judaism's most prolific writers he writes several texts, commentaries on the Haggadah. He writes several commentaries on the Torah. He writes a bibliography of Jewish texts. He writes an autobiography. He writes endless things, and he loves manuscripts. How do we know this? One of the characteristics in his writings, many times he will say, and I found it in such and such a manuscript, and I saw it in a manuscript. In fact, one of the books he published he was in Egypt, collecting money for Israel, and he found an old manuscript which was written by Rabbi Chaim Vital, the prized pupil of the Ari, a Musar book, and he publishes it in Livorno. So he's finding manuscripts everywhere, and he's fascinated in what the Torah says, why it should be saying, how it should be saying. The written word is sacred to him. I'd like to focus on his teaching of the last verse in this week's Torah portion, Vayamat telach becharan. We finished with Noach, we get to the genealogy of Avraham Avinu, and the last verse tells us about Terach passing away in Haran. Supposedly simple. Rashi in this verse tells us the Nun, the letter Nun of Haran, is back to front in the Bible, and this is a sign that until this point, until Avraham comes to the world, there is Haran, there is God's wrath in the world. Now there are two questions here. The first question, if you look at the Nun here, it's not back to front. The second question is, okay, what does it mean that this back to front Nun teaches us that by the time Avraham comes, God's wrath, stops? What's that got to do with the back to front Nun? The Chida is going to solve this problem for us, and this is what makes him a giant. This is just a glimpse in the way this great mind thinks. So, in one of his books, Chomat Tanakh, commentary on the Bible, he tells us, he brings us, he says that there are nunim afuchim, there are back to front nuns in the Bible. In fact, there's only one in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses. The one time it appears, you know how when they bring out the Torah in Shul, there's Vayi bin So Aaron? This is what it looks like. Vayi bin So Aaron in the Masoretic text is bordered by 2 back to front nuns. The reason? It's to teach you that this is not its actual place, these verses, but rather it's a bit that is put between 2 bitter bits, bad bits about us, a bit of sweetness between 2 bitter bits, and the back to front nun teaches you this this verse does not belong here. And the Chida says that, Rashi's right. He wants to prove Rashi right. He says Rashi's right that the back to front nun isn't a nun to teach you this verse doesn't belong here. And those who say that are incorrect, the Chida tells us. It's actually a back to front nun that is relevant to the actual verse, the face value of the verse. What does the back to front nun mean? Where is it? And how is it connected to Avraham and God's wrath? So the Chida tells us, if you look at in one book, if you look at the last 3 words of this verse, Vayamat terach becharan, and take the last 3 letters of the last 3 words, you have an acronym, Nachat. Nachat, tranquility. That is the back to front nun. Meaning, this is what Rashi is hinting at. That there's a famous midrash that Rabbi Akiva teaches us that this back to front nun is actually called a nun megulgelet. Nun, if you look at the letter nun, it's like a humble person, it's sort of down like this. And so a back to front nun is to teach you that up until this point in history, the world is full of pride. Once we reach Avraham Avinu, you have this huge giant who should be proud, but he's one of the most humble people who ever lived. And that's why God's wrath stops. And the Chida finds, where is this in the verse? In the acronym of the last 3 letters of the last 3 words, you have Nachat, that is your back to front nun. You want more proof? In another book of his, Lechem min HaShamayim, he says, you know what, I'll give you more proof. Take the word Becharan. Becharan is an acronym of Charon Ne'epach B'midat Rachamim. Wrath was swapped for tranquility, for Rachamim. And that is, anyway, thoughts on this brilliant mind of the Chida, the way he works with letters, with words. He was a Kabbalist, he was a posek, wrote endless books. Look at some of them. Shabbat Shalom.